At 2:30 a.m., the sound of gunfire tore through the silence of Ouagadougou. Within minutes, the city went dark, phones dead, skies closed, and fear spreading faster than bullets. Something far bigger than a failed assassination was unfolding in Burkina Faso. In the early hours of Tuesday morning, around 2:30 a.m., the calm of Ouagadougou was abruptly broken by a series of distant explosions and short bursts of gunfire near the presidential compound in the Kosiem district. Within minutes, security forces realized this was no ordinary disturbance. It was an organized assault aimed directly at the heart of Burkina Faso's leadership. Eyewitnesses living near the area described the sound of automatic weapons echoing across the dark streets and the movement of unmarked vehicles carrying armed men. Some residents reported seeing vehicles equipped with advanced radio antennas and satellite uplinks, suggesting the attackers had access to military-grade communication systems, technology far beyond the reach of local insurgent groups. By 2:45 a.m., the Presidential Guard had returned fire and activated emergency protocols. The government swiftly ordered a complete lockdown of the capital, suspension of mobile networks, and a temporary airspace closure over Ouagadougou. The city's silence turned from peaceful to tense, a kind of heavy quiet that follows chaos but promises more to come. According to sources within the National Defense Council, the attack was contained before the assailants could reach the main executive residence, but several escape routes were reportedly used by unidentified operatives. Officials described the attempt as highly coordinated, hinting at external planning and insider knowledge of the compound's layout and response timing. By dawn, security checkpoints had multiplied across the capital, and armored vehicles stood guard at every key intersection. While the government publicly maintained that the situation was under control, insiders spoke of sleepless nights in the military command, where questions lingered. Who orchestrated such a calculated strike? And how had they managed to breach the capital's most protected zone without detection? The answers, as it turned out, would point toward something far more complex than a local rebellion, a shadow war involving unseen hands and external influence, leading to the deeper revelations explored in the next section. As investigators examined the aftermath of the failed assault, it quickly became clear that this was no ordinary coup attempt. The tools, tactics, and timing all pointed to something far more sophisticated, a shadow operation with possible foreign coordination at its core. Forensic specialists analyzing recovered devices discovered encrypted communication systems, signal jammers, and advanced GPS trackers rarely seen in local insurgencies. Preliminary data trails even linked some of the equipment to European-based private defense contractors who operate in the Sahel under humanitarian or logistical covers. These traces have raised critical questions within Burkina Faso's defense circles. Was this an isolated act of rebellion, or part of a broader foreign-sponsored destabilization plan? Cybersecurity analysts working alongside the military uncovered another layer: digital interference synchronized with the physical attack. Just as the gunfire began, networks across parts of Ouagadougou experienced unexplained outages, and bursts of online disinformation began appearing on local social media channels. Dozens of anonymous accounts circulated conflicting reports about the president's condition, aiming to sow panic and confusion. Experts believe this timing wasn't accidental. It mirrors the hybrid warfare tactics used by powerful states and private intelligence groups to paralyze governments before a political strike. Senior regional observers have also pointed out the methodological similarities between this incident and previous covert operations attributed to Western-aligned intelligence networks. While Burkina Faso's government has refrained from naming any country, analysts suggest the patterns are consistent with advisory or facilitative roles often played by foreign contractors in Africa's conflict zones. At the same time, intelligence experts caution against hasty conclusions. In modern cyber operations, false flags are common. Attackers often mimic Western digital signatures to provoke diplomatic crises or shift blame. Even so, the scale and sophistication of the assault indicate that local actors alone could not have executed it. Whether directly orchestrated by foreign powers or inspired by their methods, the message was unmistakable. Burkina Faso's efforts to assert its independence have disturbed powerful interests. The attempted assassination on Captain Traoré was not just an attack on a leader, it was a warning, shot at a movement challenging the old order of influence and control in Africa. Captain Ibrahim Traoré has emerged as more than just a military leader. He has become a symbol of Africa's new resistance. Since seizing power in 2022, His message has been simple but revolutionary. Africa must own its destiny. In his speeches, Traoré often echoes the ideals of Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary Burkinabe leader who, decades ago, dreamed of an Africa free from economic slavery and external manipulation. To Traoré, Burkina Faso's future lies in breaking the cycle of dependence, not only from Western financial systems but also from the psychological grip of colonial influence. His government's recent moves, expelling French troops, strengthening alliances with neighboring Sahel nations, and pursuing security cooperation with non-Western partners, have angered many in the West. But for millions of young Africans, these actions represent a bold assertion of dignity and identity. In a continent where resource wealth often becomes a curse, Traoré's administration has focused on reclaiming national control over gold, cotton, and energy sectors. His critics call it populism. His supporters call it economic liberation. Yet, such defiance does not come without cost. The more Burkina Faso distances itself from traditional Western alliances, the more it risks isolation and, as recent events suggest, potential covert retaliation. Still, Traoré's message resonates across Africa. We are not beggars. We are a proud people reclaiming what was always ours. His vision is shared by a growing generation of African youth who see their continent not as a battlefield of global powers, but as a rising force, one that must shape its own political and economic narrative. The attack on his life, therefore, wasn't just a security incident. It was an attempt to silence a movement, one that threatens to shift the geopolitical balance of power in the region. And that is why the world is watching Burkina Faso so closely, not merely because of who was targeted, but because of what he represents, a challenge to centuries of dominance, and a spark of awakening that may redefine Africa's future. When the news of the attempted assassination of Captain Ibrahim Traoré first broke, the global media landscape responded with an unsettling quiet. Major Western outlets mentioned the event only briefly, buried beneath headlines about economic forecasts and celebrity gossip. There was no outrage, no investigative rush, and no calls for justice. Instead, there was a strategic silence. Observers across Africa quickly noticed this pattern. The same networks that had once broadcast live coverage of regime changes in Libya or coups in Mali were now treating a direct attack on an African head of state as a minor local incident. This selective coverage raised uncomfortable questions. Was the silence a coincidence or a deliberate attempt to control the narrative? Independent journalists from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger began piecing together details long before global agencies did. Their reports suggested that the attack had deeper geopolitical undertones, but such perspectives were largely ignored by mainstream Western outlets. Instead, the narrative shifted toward portraying Traoré as a controversial or authoritarian figure, subtly framing him as someone whose survival or downfall carried little consequence. African commentators, however, saw through the pattern. Across social platforms, hashtags like #Hands off Burkina Faso and I stand with Traoré trended in multiple languages. Youth-led media collectives demanded transparency and accused Western institutions of hypocrisy, preaching democracy while silencing voices of self-determination. Meanwhile, Russia, China, and other non-Western nations issued carefully worded statements condemning the violence and expressing support for Burkina Faso's sovereignty. Whether these statements were sincere or strategic remains open to debate. But one thing was clear: the battle for public perception had begun. In today's world, wars are not only fought on the ground but also in the media feeds and information streams that shape global opinion. The muted response from Western media served as a quiet confirmation of what many Africans already believed, that the fight for sovereignty isn't just political. It's also a war of stories, where silence can be as powerful as bullets. The night bullets rained near Captain Ibrahim Traoré's residence. A message was sent, not just to one man, but to an entire continent. Burkina Faso's defiance against external domination has made it both a symbol of African courage and a target of geopolitical manipulation. This attempted assassination was never only about removing a leader. It was about testing the limits of sovereignty in a world where influence is exercised through money, data, and disinformation rather than open military invasion. The silence of major powers, the shadowy fingerprints of foreign actors, and the chaos of conflicting narratives all reveal a deeper truth: that Africa's fight for independence has simply evolved into a more complex battlefield. Yet, in the face of fear and foreign pressure, Burkina Faso stands tall. The resilience of its people, from soldiers on the front lines to citizens guarding Truth on social media proves that the continent is awakening to its own power. The question now is not whether Africa can resist external control, but whether it can build unity strong enough to transform resistance into true liberation. Burkina Faso's ordeal exposes a new kind of warfare, one waged through intelligence, perception, and technology. Traoré's survival symbolizes not just personal resilience but the endurance of a nation determined to shape its destiny. For Africa, the lesson is clear. Sovereignty is not declared. It is defended every day through awareness, cooperation, and vigilance. If today Burkina Faso faces the storm for daring to stand free, which nation will be tested next? And will the world once again choose silence